Okay, so my name is Shantali Gander, and I'm here with Kaylynn Sullivan Two Trees to talk about the anthology Sign and Breath. And so, just a little introduction to Kaylynn. Kaylynn is an artist, a catalyst, and a guide who works across mediums, connections, and social constructions focused on creating sacred space for deep remembering and reciprocal communication and relationship with nature and the unseen world. So, Kaylynn, I'm so excited that you said yes to this anthology. So, why don't
And
we start with you?
okay, I'm really honored to be in the anthology. And so this is from something called Eye to Eye. Small clues of mysterious and elusive memory come when I am still. It touches me. Big Eyes shrinks and expands. My individuality falls away, so what is uniquely, essentially myself becomes small I. Individuation remains in the letter, a mark, retaining shape and distinction. The dot, the infinite relationship from which this individuation springs. To experience these moments at will, I need rigorous and consistent assistance, protocols for the integrity of the soul. As gentle rocking sometimes stills the cries of a child, the rhythm of breath nudges the mind, first to curiosity, then on to stillness and focus. Breath opens in the space between inhale and exhale. I am. The mark that defines the substance of me fills and stretches to the dot above. Where I am whole, memory comes full in me, not creeping from my peripheral vision, but filling me with an experience beyond the sensory. My being extends beyond the mark of I to the grasses and insects, the stars and planets, the birds and fishes, the wind and clouds, the angry and joyful, the blessed and invisible, the grieving and celebrated. There is no end to the naming of myself. I am becoming we.
I love that. And one of the things I love because it reminds me of your latest work, Falling into Language, and the way that, you know, I keep thinking you're the one that introduced me to the Ursula K. Le Guin. She unnames them, and Eve going through and unnaming everything and then becoming more connected by the unnaming. Can you talk to me a bit about why this selection and what it means for you? I know this is an anthology print, but we're also here speaking to each other, and your thoughts just around language and voice.
Well, I have to admit that these words came to me 20 years ago in and they came through a practice I had. I lived out off the grid, and I had a ranch, and I would walk the perimeter of the ranch every day as my practice, as my reconnection practice. And in the course of doing that, these flood of words would come sometimes, and I would go home and then I would write them down. And over the course of this 20 years, the context has changed so drastically in myself, as I age in this country, in this culture, in the way that I move in the world, in the way that we're all moving in the world, in terms of the pandemic and everything. And I go back and look at the words and they still feel connected. But they feel connected to the breath, to the land, to the beingness. And so I feel like there's something both that I was trying to do in falling into language and what I feel like these words do, which is always trying to catalyze or initiate or evoke, provoke the the connection we have to the whole and the holy, to the great mystery, to the source from which all things come, whatever you call that, the unknowable, the ineffable, but as it exists in our life today, as it exists in the moment that we're having, not in some abstract. It's there's nothing abstract about it for me.
I love that. And what would you say for you as you think about, because I've often heard you talk about your practice of invoke, evoke, and provoke, and how does that relate specifically to this piece? And also in terms of how you think of voice, like in all the ways that you think of your voice or voice as it relates to this.
Well, um, I'm going to dance around that a little bit um, because I use the word invoke, but actually the thing I really mean, or how it applies to me, is surrender. I surrender my, I try to surrender myself so that something can come through me. So that's my invocation. My invocation is surrender to following what comes through me and not trying to will something or not trying to create a good idea. I'm much more interested in the calling that comes through me than a good idea. And so in that process, I'm I'm doing that so that I feel that I am connecting to the things that all of us are connected to, the force, the life force that is connecting all of us, so that it evokes a memory in other people, and so that we remember that we're connected, and that we remember, particularly for me, that nature is it's the greatest reminder, and that we are nature. And I know when I say that often, or when I do that, that it provokes some resistance, some deep memory, some remembering and not wanting to remember, some oh, but no, some yeah, buts, lots of yeah, buts. And that feels like generative tension to me. And generative tension for me is what breaks open seed coats of consciousness.
I love that. Yeah, that's so cool. It's funny because I know you have also performed, you've also danced. And so in working across these different mediums and in your writing, do you find have you composed with, especially when you composed this piece specifically, 20 years ago, and as you revisit it for this, did you ever have performance in mind versus the page? Or is there ever like, especially because you work across mediums, and when you think of sign and breath, is there ever anything where they're like in tension with each other? Or are you thinking about how it's performed for audience versus how you might see it on a page for you? Is there?
Well, this writing came out whole. I did not craft anything. I would come back from those walks and it would kind of this is a terrible image, but it was like I kind of vomited it out. It was like a hairball, and it went on the page. Um, but I have written in the past for performance, and particularly like choral voices. I did work years and years ago for choral voices, orchestrated voices with text. Um, and so that's actually, then I use language like music. So that was a score. I wrote the scripts as scores. This is the bass line, this is the melody line, this is so I think that it depends on what's coming through me at the moment. Like, oh, this needs to be like this, because I think it's going to be something like falling into language. The paintings were paintings, but I knew that they were going to be sung, and I knew that they were going to be probably be a movie, some moving images. So I still make them the way I'm going to make them, but I know that that I'm going to change and they're going to change, because when they change medium, I get changed. I learn things when I change things from one, expand them from one medium to another. I learned a lot in falling into language. I learned a lot actually reshaping these for this moment, even when the context changes.
Mm.
Went, oh, no, they were longer lines. Oh, they should be shorter. The attention there needs to be a little bit more tension and whatever in it. And so that's, I think I'm always learning from it as it moves through its iterations or changes or transformations.
Would you say that's true also of your voice over time, where it's instructing you, or like where somehow you're opening yourself as a conduit such that you're learning from it through different with whatever is going on through different modalities?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, and over time, and as I get older, I mean, just aging and what's physically possible for you to do at one age, but not another. And so I learn in that way. I also learn how much of me needs to be in it. In the beginning, there was a lot of me, when I was performing. So I was in it. And then I had the thought that I could actually do more if I wasn't in it, that I could be a bigger conduit if I wasn't in it. So then I stopped being in it. I'm not sure what comes next, but I always love the process of discovering. I mean, film and music. I'm loving those. I really love those as mediums, and so I think it's a constant. I don't know what maybe it's a constant shifting and growing and learning, and I also think that I'm close to leaving. When I started making work, I was, not far from coming in. So 50 or 60 years later, I'm close to leaving. And so that's just a different perspective. It gives me a different, I stand in a different place. The context is really different. And we don't talk about that very much.
No, we
But I
don't.
think,
We don't.
no, but I think it's really, it's a big deal
Mm-hmm. Well,
for
and
me,
also
at least for
too,
my work.
yeah. Well, and I was going to say, even in the impact of what we do focus a lot on artists, writers, what have you, and writers are also in that group of artists. In my mind, there's no bifurcation of it. Where we're focused on the emerging or focused on the young, but we don't think across lifespan and then how that then impacts one's work or
Hmm.
sense of being, or even like as we're talking about here, what would sign and breath mean and all
Hmm.
those iterations of life. Is there anything else you want to add as we wrap up?
Um, well, I think that one of the things that I really appreciate about this process, as opposed to other writing I've done in the past, which is that it feels like it does have more breath. And I always think about things I've written in the past as frozen, that they are frozen moments in time,
Hmm.
and then I move on. I keep moving and they're frozen in that time. And there's something about this process that includes both the text and and the conversation that feels like it has more breath. And I'm hoping that we'll be less frozen.
I love that. With that, we will wrap. Thank you so much for talking to me, Kaylin. I
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate it.